We also got a hold of some pics of a Acura NSX mule, supposedly an Acura NSX mule that's been lapping the Nürburgring. I guess it's been over the last 2 weeks or so. But it's sporting the body panels and lights and what have you from an S2000. And aside from KGP, the people that have been shooting the pics, that's really the only confirmation that we have that it's the NSX. From all outward appearances, we know the body's been stretched a little bit. The wheelbase is probably about maybe 10, 12 inches wider, or longer, I should say, than the normal S2000. It's got a hard top that's also quite a bit bigger. It's kind of hard to tell from the photos if it's any wider, just because there's really nothing to base it off of. But the tailpipes are giving us an indication it's not your normal run-of-the-mill S2000. The major thing that kind of has thrown me a curve since this new NSX has been spotted is just the fact that Honda is moving away from the mid-engine setup that made the first NSX, the typical everyday supercars that's been called before. In place, it's going to be probably having a V10 producing some ungodly amount of horsepower, probably 500 horsepower. So,
it seemed to get very well. I mean, from the talk and the rumors about what the new NSX will be, it seems to be completely opposite from what the NSX was.
Do we think it's giant engine NSX badge then?
Well, they've got a lot of brand equity in that badge. I mean,
they do.
If you call it an NSX, it becomes, people immediately are going to, be drawn to it.
At least know that it's an extremely premium, high power, it's going to be extremely premium, well-handling sports car. I don't know if they'll know that it will be high-powered, but because the original NSX was
it's going to have a 10-cylinder. Come on.
Well, I mean, it will be high-powered, but the original NSX was never known to be like a powerhouse.
Right.
No,
I mean, it had a naturally aspirated V6. Yeah, it was just a perfectly balanced car.
Yeah.
In that respect, I'm kind of sad to see the original spirit of the NSX gone, because I thought that the original NSX was just outstanding and so unique in that way. In that it was just a perfectly balanced car, kind of like the way the old Lotus Esprits were very well balanced and made the most out of a 4-cylinder, just out of lightweight, and that was kind of Honda's hallmark. So it's kind of
don't think that Honda doesn't know that that's what everybody takes away when they think of the NSX either.
Is this going to be like? I have a question. Is this V10 going to be like an 8-liter V10, or is it going to be like some really small displacement, high revving V10? Like,
I'm guessing it'll be small, like F1 style, F1 derived,
that'd be cool.
Deal.
3.5 liters, maybe less.
Damn, I'm down with that.
It's gonna make a glorious noise if it does.
Yeah. But you know what? These types of spy shots are the worst for me, because it literally was a Franken S2000. With a bolt here.
That's like really have no idea.
Yeah. Well, that's like those early ones that were supposedly the Porsche Panamera that had the M5 bodywork on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Well, wow, I'm
great.
Staring at an Right, I'm staring at an S2000, and we don't even know for sure that this is the NSX mule.
No, it could be the next S2000 for all we know.
Right, exactly. Yeah. These are pretty far off product plans that we're talking about. So when you see something on the Nürburgring or testing, it's a crapshoot as to what it really is, and it's just fun to speculate. Let's jump into something a little bit more consumer oriented, something for
mundane.
People.
Yes,
something more mundane. It has come to our attention that Chevy will indeed get a version of the Lambda-based CUVs that are currently out.
I have such a problem with this.
Alex, do you want to start hissing, or do you want me to?
Yeah, no, let me start hissing. The thing that's most troubling here is that the whole point, I thought, was for the Saturn to be the sort of entry-level Lambda. And you can get a Saturn Outlook very nicely equipped for around $34,000. And well, I just had one last week, so this is how I know, because I have the sticker right here next to me. And that is significantly less than a similarly equipped Acadia, because the Acadia has some extra standard equipment and stuff. Go ahead.
Do you know what, though? They expect, and they've said this publicly, the Acadia to be the volume seller, all the way up to 60% total sales of all the Lambda CUVs.
I just don't get it, because the Outlook is just... Here's the thing. They have identical powertrains and identical suspension tuning. So the drive experience, there is no difference between the two.
Right.
I've talked to some people who have driven both, and they said, oh, well, the Outlook feels faster. Listen, I drove both. They feel the same. And I like both a lot. But for the money, I think you can't really touch the Outlook, compared to the Acadia. Listen, I don't care if I have a head-up display, which you get with the Acadia. I don't need that. So right. The Acadia has some stuff like that, you know what, the Acadia is really nice too, and I do like its styling. But if it's my wallet and I'm the one that's going to be writing a check for one of these things, I'm probably going to go with the Saturn. So
right.
Unless they price this Chevy and really, go cut rate with it and make it like a $25,000, car, which, I don't know how they're going to do without it being a complete stripper inside. I fail to see the point.
I mean, this comes back to part of GM's problem, which is just their over-badge engineering. Honestly, the final nail in the coffin is if this thing comes out with a Saab badge on it, that would be it. I mean, that would be it right there.
I'll tell you what, though, Damon, this would do better as a Saab than the Trailblazer.
You know what? That's actually a really good point I hadn't thought about, but you're exactly right. Now, this would be better. This would be totally better as a Saab, and I say that knowing that we'll get hate mail for it. But Chevy.
Yeah, back to your original point. No, wait, hold on a second. I just want to rant one more time, and then you can play devil's advocate. To Damon's point, the whole thing here with GM was going to be not so much of the rebadging and more brand differentiation and all this stuff. And they appear to be on the right track. I mean, you have the Malibu and the Aura look very different from each other. They're targeted differently. You're going to have variations in powertrains and stuff like this. This is like straight out of the 80s rebadging, just with better quality styling and much better interiors. But it's still the old formula, which I really don't understand.
The difference is they're rebadging good cars rather than the 80s and 90s where they rebadged bad cars. I mean, these are competitive in their classes, and that's kind of the confliction, is that at least each brand is actually getting a good vehicle, even though it's a vehicle you could get at three other brands. So it's stupid and redundant in that sense. Yes, I completely agree.
I mean, so far, they've done a very good job, because the Outlook looks different than the Acadia, and they both look completely different than the
Well, I would say the Outlook and the Acadia look slightly different. I mean, basically from the A-pillar back until you get to the very back.
Windows and doors are the same.
But you get to the Buick Enclave, and that is
very different looking.
That's a marvel that it came off the same platform as these. It doesn't share anything exterior-wise. It looks
or on the interior either.
The Enclave looks like a $40,000 CUV, in my opinion. At $40,000 plus, it'll be able to fetch the shoppers.
You're going to be able to push 50. I have to believe you're going to be able to push 50 with one of those loaded.
Yeah, that's fine, but look at it. I think it.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying, listen, if you can, you can get into the mid-40s with an Acadia, and the Buick is clearly positioned up market of the Acadia.
Right. No, that's going to go against the Lexus RX and other. Yeah,
you can put the Enclave next to the Lexus RX, and I bet you it will do just fine. As a matter of fact, they should have a Lexus RX 400 in every Buick dealership. Just like they're going to have with the Accord and the Camry. I do agree that 4 Lambda CUVs is too much, but I kind of disagree that Chevy doesn't deserve one. I question either GMC or Saturn having one. I think maybe it was a bad decision to have one of those two brands have one, and that Chevy should have had kind of a decontented version that started at like 24 or 25. Chevy is the full-line automaker. It should have one of everything.
Yeah.
Does Saturn need a 7-passenger CUV? Does GMC, the professional grade, need something as soft as a CUV?
I mean, Saturn as a division is actually growing. Isn't Saturn growing the most out of all the GM?
Well, it is, right? But it's only growing the most because 2 years ago it had 2 or 3 vehicles, and now it has like 5.